is. I'm going to close the door just so I don't get distracted from the outside. My style of teaching is more interactive and engaging. It helps me stay awake on a foggy Duluth day. This is sort of my personal view on Gradebook. I don't know everything about Gradebook, and my name is Dave Vosen, or Devo as my students call me. There's lots of Davids in my life, so my students over time just shorten my name from Dave Vosen to Devo. And so today, I hope to give you some idea of the thing that I pretty much could do without if I could as a teacher. I love interacting with students. I love engaging with material. I teach computer information systems, CIS. I teach computer architectures, which we'll see as an example here, database modeling, computer securities. I'll be teaching a new course this spring on computer forensics. So I really love technology. So my better half, Elise Carter-Vosen, does not. So we're a great team. So many of you know her because she's in the department. She's on sabbatical this year, lucky her, but she's in the GCL department here at Scholastica too. So today, what I hope to do is give you a broad view. If you would like to, please feel free to go into your own Blackboard and look at your gradebook or one of your gradebooks to make this maybe perhaps more beneficial or useful. What I will be doing along the way today is I will kind of give you these breadcrumbs. They should hopefully look familiar because this is your Blackboard course grade center, the full grade center. But how do we even get here? Now, what I've done in, let's see if I escape here. And this is always a challenge, announcements. Here's one of the courses I taught in the spring, computer architectures. And Grade Center is right down here under the control panel in the course management. So if you're following along with us in Blackboard, you can see that, oops, did it fold it over? It did. So if this happens to you, there's just this little arrow that shows up for this tab, which I often will do that to block off that screen. But down here's the full grade center. Many of you already know that, but some people raise their hands saying they haven't even used Blackboard gradebook, so I want to make sure we know how to get there. And don't worry, I've got the usernames and of the students hidden, but you're seeing some live results of their the gradebook, the full grade center. So when I say the full grade center, let's see, that's what I'm referring to. That looks yummy. So the first thing we can talk about is creating a column. So if we create a column, if we go and see that in our full grade center, that is pretty much the very foundation of all your grade center activities. So this menu, luckily, Blackboard has set up to make it repeat over and over again. There's still a lot of clicking, but I know you're working on that. So the grade center column is a generic one here for you. You'll see this asterisk at the top of many of the menus on Blackboard, whether you're creating assignment that is in the gradebook or you've already previously created the assignment. You want to be aware of what is required field. So column name obviously is going to be a required field before they'll let you go. And don't worry, if you forget to fill out required fields, you're going to get one of those pop-up messages before they let you go on. So the column name and the grade center name is limited to 15 characters approximately. Yeah, I think it is about 15, but the column name could be much longer. I tend to really abbreviate my my names just because I like them to show up better. So you can see here quiz average, which we'll be kind of focusing on today as one of the elements of that, and how to create an average column. Those I tend to have shorter. So I'll kind of say Unit 1 labs or Quiz 2 for Unit 2 quiz. I know generic, not very interesting, but it helps on the gradebook side to have sort of a systematic approach, science, right? Systematic approach to problem solving, right? So it's a scientific, logical sort of way because, again, they pay me to grade in some ways. I see it that way. No offense, but I see it that way sometimes because it can be a big deal. It can take a big very time consuming, but it's often very, very important, if not the most important thing to our students, depending on the student. So that's one of the things I would say right away is be careful about, how large how large your column name is.
Apologies, simplistic question.
Sure.
Column name, understand. Grade center name, which is used for what?
So the grade center name is what's going to show up in your actual full grade book that I was just showing you. So let me go back. This can be a long name if you want. It's more a descriptive name. And so when students look at their grade book, they'll see the longer description name. So here, so for example, practice quizzes takes up too much space for me to fit in one column. So I just, increase the column size, kind of like on a spreadsheet. But I could actually call this by its real name. What is the topic for Unit 2? I could actually have the full name if I wanted. But here in the grade book center name, that's what's going to show up. Yeah, very good question. I'm sure other people have it. So just waiting for this to get out of the way. Hey, go away. It's one of those things where you don't want it to show up there. So let me move this way down here. Good. So when you think of column names, you can write a description. And again, this description in the student's grade book, you'll see later on, will show up. So if you want to write a long description, I'll tend to do that for major assignments to say, here's the description. So that way, when they're looking at their grade, their version of the grade center, they can remember what the assignment is. If you scroll down from the create a column, you scroll down to below this description, you'll see this screen where it says percentage, the primary display. How many of you use a point-based system in your classes? A number of you do. I tend to like percentage, but it's kind of more personal preference. If there is a giant storm in Duluth and it wipes out one of my traditional classes, then I don't have to readjust the point total all the time. So I tend to do percentage bases. And then secondary display, often what I'll do is use letter grade, if it's like the semester end grade at the end. And then categories, we're going to get into more about that later. Points possible. If I'm doing percentage grades, I tend to do it on 100%. Yes?
When you do the primary display, or when you do the points or whatever, and it displays in the grade book, can you limit that decimal place? Because
I've seen that, yeah.
Like some of them are 5,
yeah.
And go out 5 spaces.
I've done it before, but I don't remember how I did it. But if you look at, you can do it.
I know that because my grade book is set up.
And I think maybe what you do in the point total is you actually say, like, for example, here's semester grade, look how many decimal places are there. So when you go to create column, I would recommend point totals, like saying, I think this might work if I put 100, oops, that's supposed to be zeros. And then maybe put in an actual decimal place, try that. But we can kind of look at that later. You can email me and I'll try to remember how I did it, because I did for my other ones. But I didn't do it for the final semester grade because I want students to say, hey, is that going to round up or not? And of course, it usually does, but it depends on the course. So for example, in this section, for primary display, you've got letter, text, percentage, complete, incomplete I use for some of those assignments where I just want them to do a survey and see that it's done. And then CIS letter grade, we'll talk about setting up grading scales. That's what we have for our CIS department. So we've kind of done that as a department. So there's less differentiation. And the students know what to expect that are our majors. Category, we'll get to that too. Category is something you can set up yourself. You see I've made a few new ones that you might not have. Exercises or discussions. I alternate depending on the class, how much hands-on it is. Sometimes I'll have one week of a discussion, next week's an exercise. It's under the same category for my syllabus. Labs, projects, final projects, exams instead of tests. So these are some ones in quizzes that I've added myself, and I'll show you how to do that. Why would you care about categories? Well, one of the advantages in Blackboard of using categories is that you can often do reporting on that. You can create a special grade view of just your quizzes or just your labs. So there's lots of advantages to actually creating categories. So if you have a series of essays throughout the year that are all the same point value or part of the same assignment type, it's important to kind of label them because it gives you a lot more power later on. Points possible, we talked a little bit about that as well. Notice this is required, so they're not going to let you do anything without that. I love rubrics. I try to give specific feedback to a student, but then they often want to know the details of their grades. Rubrics is a whole nother session in a sense, but I like using them, and then you can also reuse them too. So if there's a rubric set it up for points, it's really nice to associate that. So when you go to grade the assignment, it's already set there. If we scroll on down, you'll see dates, grading period. This is a class I taught in the spring of 2017. We'll look in a little bit about how to set up these grading periods, but you can essentially say a range, like August 31st of 2017 to December 25th of 2017, fall, 2017. So, and then it will take, if you've added that date criteria for your assignments, the due date, it will associate any due dates within that time frame with that grading period automatically. So if you're using a course shell from previous semesters, like I kind of do, I don't like to reinvent the wheel all the time. So I will go in there and set up that and reset up my date so it does it automatically. Down here, you see options for including column and grade center calculations. You can say no if that assignment gets dropped for some reason, or if it's just a survey type of a situation. Show this column to students. Maybe you want to say no until you're ready to release that information to students. So that's one way to do it among others. And then you can say yes later. You can come back and edit that column later and say yes. Statistics, you can do that as well. If you want students to see how their score compares to the rest of the students in the course, you can have that there as well. And as always, whenever you're doing anything in Blackboard and you're done, you want to hit the submit button. I'm going to cancel that for now.
Should I wait to ask questions? Because I was going to ask about the feature when you reuse a course.
You mean changing the due dates, the global change of due dates? Yeah. I can answer that if we have time at the end. Okay. I'm guessing we're not, but we'll see. We'll see how, because we're going till 9:40, 11:45, 10:45, 10:30, 10:45. We'll see if we can can you help me remember to talk about that? Because I'm just trying to, that is a part of the Grade Center, but it's also a part of just Blackboard features as a whole. So I didn't necessarily focus on that. So when we look at calculating, so all I'm going to do, you can't really see that, is go from left to right. So this is sort of our roadmap. I'm just kind of taking us across that main menu in the grade book because so many of you had questions about everything. So I'm kind of giving you the full Monty, so speak. So here is essentially the average column. So when we go back and forth between our grade book, here we are, the average column. And you can refer to my slides too anytime you like. So here, if I'm making an average column, I want to give it a name. So for example, I did a quiz average. So quiz, a type of assignment, or I could do lab or exercise/discussions. So one of the ways to use averages is for a specific type of assignment. So if you say on your syllabus that quizzes are worth 20% of their overall semester grade, then it's nice to have at the beginning of your grade book, in my opinion, that early column for the students to see how well they're doing in each of your different types of assignments in the course. So again, assigning labels to these types of grading categories is very useful. And so if you want it just to be the same in the grade center as well as in the actual column grade center name, just leave it the same. And so percentages, if you're doing average, is probably a good idea, but if you're doing points and you want to know, based off of that, you could do that probably as well. Although, yeah, score would be the point system. And again, if you wanted to have a letter grade, you could have that associated. It would say if it's a 91%, then if your letter grade is set up to say 90 to 92.5 as an A-, it'll put A- next to the actual grade. So, and then grading period, I'll just say here, I've already done this, of course. And then all grade columns, here's where you want to, if you're going to do a specific create an average column, then you're going to want to say select column and categories. So here's a situation where, of course, you could do all grades, but it depends how you weight or don't weight your point system and your individual assignments. You could do that for specific years, kind of back to if you had it for a different year and you're keeping the same course shell. Here I can select specific columns. If we're doing quiz types, I would just go to quiz. And this is, at first it'll say preview, well, here's all the assignments that fit that gradebook category right down here. And then what you want to do is hit this little extra feature, a little too much clicking. Not a drag and drop doesn't work yet, I don't think. I can push it over to here, and again, it gives me a little bit more features, all grading periods or just a specific grading period, equally or proportionally, almost too many options. You can drop grades or use only the highest value to calculate depending on your syllabus, or the lowest depending on how you want to use those assignment types. I tend to have one drop, so I'd put in one drop, and what that would do is their dog ate one of their quizzes the entire semester. So out of, whatever, 12 or 16 quizzes, they had a bad week. And instead of asking me to, let them open it up again or whatever it might be, I say, oh, that's your one drop. And then incentive-wise, at least in my class, to not have any drops. And then if you don't have any drops, it'll just drop your lowest score automatically. So if your lowest score was an 82, then it drops out of there as well. So it's nice because it does it good and bad. If you do drops or some of these, it will do it often as a running total if you say yes here. So what that means at the beginning of the semester, sometimes these averages, in this case, the quiz example, might not show an actual average because the first quiz might be the lowest score because it's the only quiz. So keep that in mind too, that if you're doing a running total. Questions on this?
If you don't want to drop any grades, do you have
Oh,
to
you don't
put
have
zero?
to. You don't have to put any, yeah, you don't have to drop any at all. Yeah.
So if you leave it blank,
You just leave it blank. It won't drop anything. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you'll notice that we're going to see the same in many of our column, when we're creating these columns. It's going to be the same kind of top part. The dates is in there. And about that specific type of column, in this case, an average column. And at the bottom, the options tend to be the same. Do you want to include it in the grade, in the calculations? Do you want it to show to students? Do you want to show the statistics? Okay, so again, they're reusing, thank you for doing that, reusing the same sort of menus over and over again with a little bit of variety in the middle. So once you kind of get used to that, it's not so bad. It's just these details, like will it drop automatically, knowing them. So I'm going to cancel this one, but if I was really doing this, I would hit submit. I'll hit cancel, and then we'll look at the one I made for quizzes just so you get an idea. So if I made a column, and so here's the columns I've made, they show up. If I make a new one, it's going to be way at the end, way down here at the end, and you'd have to go to column organization to reorganize it. So I actually moved the column up here in the front. So semester grades, the first thing they see at the top of their student grades. Exercises, practice quizzes. So if I go in here and I want to change that, I hit edit column, and then you're back to the same menu that we just saw before. Here I actually have the description for my syllabus. I just cut and paste it from my syllabus in here for these types of assignments. I guess it's 15%, not 20. Oops. At least in this class. Percentages, selected columns. You see here I have quiz, and I've dropped the lowest score. Question, Brendan?
The semester grade, do you set the boundaries in for the letters that go with the percentages?
Yes. Can I table that?
Yeah.
We're getting there. It's coming up. So I mentioned, I don't know how, I think I just drag and move this. There we go. I mentioned student view, and I have this on the slide. So if you're following the slides, it's one of the, like the last third or fourth one, but let me just show you that right away. Edit mode is one way, so I can say edit mode on or off. If I say on, it doesn't seem very different for instructor view. But if I go here to edit student preview mode, then what it's going to do, if you haven't done this before, if you haven't clicked that little kind of circular green eye, it'll take a little bit of time, because what Blackboard is doing in the background in the cloud is creating essentially a student user by your name, a preview user. And so if you go into settings here, you notice it's on. I asked it not to ask me, but the first time you do this, it's going to say student preview settings, and then I say keep the preview user and all data. So this way, if I want to test out an assignment before students are in that unit, maybe it's 2 weeks down the road, whatever it might be, then I can have this stuff set up so I actually can see the grade book. Because often when you try it as an instructor, if you don't switch this mode, it just says grade center is not available to instructors. So you don't really have that sense of what's actually being shown. So I'll save that. And so now I'm kind of there as a student. So if I go down here to course grades, you'll see that the column organization, semester grades there, grading criteria, view the full description. We talked about quiz average. Let's look at that. So that description that I wrote into the quiz average is right there. So they can, and which is nice because I think students, based on my statistics, spend a lot of time looking at the student grades, the course grades. They spend a lot of time on that part in Blackboard. So this is something to think about. Graded, upcoming, and submitted are all there too. So you can see what that side, you think you returned assignments to students, and then you can go in this preview to see if it actually did get submitted back to them. So it's nice. You don't have to fly blind, as it kind of always felt before this kind of came around. So when you're done with that, you can just hit exit preview. Questions before I go back about student preview?
Is that only on courses that you do the community course? Does that show up?
I don't know. Anybody else here know that for sure?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think you have to be the instructor. I don't think TAs have this view either. I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
Okay, to be continued on that question. So, but this is also kind of nice to see if you do have teaching assistants in your course to see what they've graded, you know, where they are in that process too. And so you just hit exit. So again, it's this button right here. And if you're not sure if that's the right button, just hover over it. And then there's that feedback, enter student preview mode. So now when I go to the full grade center, if you notice, there's this column right here. Now, normally it'd have my user ID Boson, you know, preview student, something along those lines with an underscore, a long name. It's not showing up because it says, you know, I turned that feature off. But this line right here with no grade information is my preview in that situation. So I haven't turned anything in. I've been a bad student in the May, I guess. So that is a student preview. So kind of back onto our pathway here. If we go to our next slide, let me just do present mode again. So that is the average column. Min and max column, has anybody used that? It's not something I use very often, but in many situations, maybe you want to see what is the minimum grade, or maybe perhaps you're using that. Maybe you have an assignment like quizzes that are just to get familiar with the material, and they're a low-level, low-hanging fruit sort of intro to your courses. And so maybe you say, you know, I'm taking the lowest score as your final score for that category to get them to retake the quizzes and to improve their score, whatever it might be for mastery. So maybe you could do that. I don't tend to use it very often. I do have an example though that I did build in here called, you notice this symbol right here too. If you see this symbol in your grade book with a slash through it, that's a minimum quiz, I've called it. That means it's not visible to students. So that's kind of one of the ways too. If you forgot to click that on the options saying make it available for students to view, then you'll notice that symbol there. And if that's what you wanted to, you want to see that symbol there. So if I go in here and pretend like I created a minimum, then lowest quiz score, same stuff up on top. But here you see it's slightly different. Instead of it being average, it's minimum or maximum, and then you select the columns. And just like I did for the previous example, I just used quiz and I moved it over here. That's all. Let's see, cancel that. So minimum quiz, so you can see what their minimum scores were. So the other one is total column. And this is useful for those of you that do use point totals. I tend to like hide the automatic course gradebook has like a total column. It just shows up automatically. So I actually put that in, and I hide that from the students so they don't freak out that I've got only 9,000 points and they're expecting more. So that's one of those things too. So let's take a look at a total column. If we go in and do that, so here we are, total column. You'll go in here, call it a name. Maybe it's the quiz totals, etc. And then again, you can do it for all graded columns. You could do it for specific, you know, just for the fall 2016 or selected categories. You could do that as well. Here you can specifically select which columns are going to be added up, but I like to use categories like we mentioned. So if you wanted to, you could do that for quizzes and pull that over again if you want, is our example. And again, here you have the options to drop the highest or lowest scores or use the lowest or highest values. Okay, so again, repetition is in there, so hopefully that makes it easier to kind of get in and use these features if you want them. if they're useful to you, because there's no sense in using it just to use it if it's not going to be useful for your course. So the one that I use quite a bit, I don't use total column, I use weighted columns. And weighted columns I use specifically for my semester grades. So when we look at creating a weighted column, you're just going to go to the same drop-down menu, weighted column. And let me show you the one that I created for this course. Here you can see the decimal places are out of whack. So let's see if we can change that on the fly. So here I've just copied the percentages that I use for this particular course for those types of assignments you see listed here. And they're also listed on the gradebook. And then I said as a percentage, and then I have CIS letter grade. So our letter grade is basically associated with those percentages and where they lie in that. Down here, you'll see again, weighted column. You want to specifically select columns in your gradebook, specific assignments, or do you want to look at categories? So if you set up categories, which I did, here's our quiz example. And exercise average or discussion, project total, lab average, and exam average. Each of these individual weighted percentages for those assignments are representative on the syllabus. So that's kind of why I repeated up here for their descriptions, just so they know where that score comes from. So they kind of know the math behind where this is coming from. And you can calculate it as a running total. What I often do for my courses is I hide it until after midterms, so students aren't so, but it's up to you. Because if they see that running total for the semester grade in the first week or two, sometimes they panic or they get, over intensified about their grades, which is important, but I want them to learn the material too, not just obsess about their grade. So it's up to you to do that. So if you didn't want to have it available the first week or two, because there's not a whole lot in your grade book, or you're slow to grade, kind of like me, I'm working on getting better at that, you'd say no. And and then show this to students. You could also say no if you wanted to do that. That's what I was talking about. So this one, included in the grade center calculations, I don't think it would matter if it's a summative one for all your averages. Again, show statistics if you want to. Questions on that? That's an important one, I think. Okay. So now we're moving into the manage field. Here's all your options for managing your gradebook. Grading periods, we talked based on most of these. Grading periods, fall semester 2017. Grading schemas, what is your A, what's your A minus, setting those up. Color codes you see already, yellow is a certain percentage, below 60 I think it is. There's blue for above 90, you don't see it here, but there's red if something's not graded, but this is a previous course. So categories we've talked about, quiz is a specific category. Smart views, we'll talk about that. How do I just look at all the quizzes? I'm trying to stay with that example in one gradebook view. Column organization, if I created a quiz, a new quiz column, it'll show up at the end. How do I bring it up so it is sooner in the course or matches up with my course due dates? Row visibility, student dropped the course, but you're still seeing their row visibility 3 or 4 weeks later. So you can make it invisible so you don't worry about that student so much. Send email. Okay, so onward. When we look at grading periods, I think I have to go back. Yeah, I tried out one of these new features. So when we look at grading periods, you'll see here I've got spring 2017, fall from a previous course, and I've set the date ranges. I can delete them here if I select them, but I can create a new one. If I create a new one, it's supposed to show up slowly. There it goes. I create a name, so I would call it fall 2017. I would give it a description. These are, the due dates for our semester, the fall semester, And then I would say something about the range, the start date, August 31st, 2017, and the end. And then this button down at the bottom, associate this grading period with all columns that have due dates within the range, is very helpful if you have all the due dates set up in advance. Or if you don't even, you can do that. And then once you change the due dates, just come back here, re-hit this and hit submit, and it'll auto-refresh it for you. So do you want me to show you that live, or are you okay with that? Okay, I'll show you that live. So live, I'll just say cancel here. And let's say that we're going to go in and manage grading periods, and you'll see the ones I had before. Create grading period. 2017. Come on in, just gradebook. Oh yeah. Range to start. You can hit this button if you want to actually see a calendar, which is kind of nice. I certainly hope I don't have students submitting stuff, on the 24th of December, and then associate any in that time period. So now you see it right here, fall 2017. When we go to create a column, it'll be one of those options on, which grading period do you want. It would now be on that options menu and all the views we've seen up to this point.
I guess I don't understand the purpose.
True.
In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if I used a course last year and I roll it into a new course, is there a magic button to just get all those dates right that I don't have to attention? Is that what this does? That's something different.
That's separate. Yeah, that's data management. So what this does on here, I went into, and I'll go over this, how you manage column organization. So you see down here, not in the grading period, or it's down here, fall 2017. You could just not have any grading periods, and that could be okay. It just doesn't give you the option of, of setting it up that way for those grading periods. So you could just ignore it too and make it work. You don't have to do it. Yeah, but just be careful if you do. Sometimes when you make assignments and you forgot to say what grading period it is, it will show up down here. It won't show up, as the student view, it'd be down at the bottom or not at all, depending on how the student view of grades is set up.
I'm not clear why you would want fall 2016.
I don't for a new course, but this was a course that I didn't teach fall 2016. I think it just used that in my course shell, and I had it set up from a previous course. I just never deleted it. So to your point, Daryl, I don't know. You could, if you're reusing the same shell from year to year because you wanted to. We don't tend to do that because then we can't import our student usernames and all that. But if maybe it's a course that's going over more than one semester, it's a 2-semester course. I don't know. It sounds pretty rare.
Would you ever use it if you have like your semester split into 2 pieces and you're really looking for a grading period?
Could be.
For the first half of the
Could be.
year until a certain
Could be internships, for example, might fall under that. If they're, that might be some examples. So, but personally, I haven't used it so much like that. So if I were to go in here and clean this up, I would go in and say, get rid of that. So I don't accidentally use fall 2016. Very easy for me to do on the dropdown. Now it will not appear on the dropdown menus on any of the create a column creating assignments. Good questions. So back to Grading Center, grading periods, grading schemas. And so this is the idea that, you have, what is an A in your course? Tell me, professor, tell me now, So this is one of the ways that you can have that set up based off your syllabus. And then you don't have to think about it once you've set it up. Well, you'll probably be reminded of it by your students. So when we go into Grade Center and we go to grade schemas, you can see this is the, I would just hit, create, just like I did for our grading period, but this is what I create, the following letter grade for all undergraduate courses. And then, so this is similar to our other patterns of creating in Blackboard, but the schema map is new. So here, if my letter grade was a 92.5, was an A, where's the A pluses? Come on, Scholastica, where's our A pluses? Oh, well. So 92.5, maybe that is your A. So if I type that in by hand, you'll see that it changes the next grade down, automatically adjusts to less than 92.5. Now, if I add another 0 on there to the question of significant figures asked earlier, it will actually, do that to the hundredths place. So you could actually set that up depending on how your syllabus is set up. Are you going to go to the thousandths place? It's up to you to decide. So bring that back. And then let's say that you wanted to call it, I usually go in this order, but you can delete the rows here on the side. This is interesting over here too. So if you use a grade book where you don't want to enter in an actual percentage grade, it's a paper, you want to give an A, an A minus, a B plus, whatever it might be. Here you can decide what that would be quantitatively from the qualitative grade. I guess it's still quantitative, but from the letter grade. You could decide what, if you enter in the grade book an A to a student assignment, it would automatically associate with that percentage. Questions? Okay, keep moving on. So now we're moving down the list, color codes. So you see here an example of color codes. Here you see that I've got in progress is white. Needs grading would be red. These are pre-assigned actually, so I don't necessarily have anything against the color red, but it was pre-assigned by Blackboard. Green means exempt. These are the ones I made, and I'll show you how to make your own if you want, or how to change these colors. And what the output of that is for our slides as your reference would be here is an exempt grade. Also has this little symbol. Yellow is showing something under 65% and under, would show up in yellow in my book. If this assignment wasn't graded, it would be a big red block on there. And you've probably seen that already in your grade book. It's pre-assigned. But what if you want to make some changes? Maybe you want anything, certain grades you want highlighted in a different color, like this is anything 95 and over, or 97.4 and 101 gets highlighted with blue. So to do that, if you're a visual person in your grade book, I'll hit cancel here for now. And then, okay. So again, we're going to manage, grading periods, schemas. Now we're at color codes. Here you can see the grade ranges. Enable color coding. If it distracts you, it visually distracts you, or maybe like some of my friends, you're colorblind and doesn't really help you, you can turn that off right here. In progress, you can change that color to any color you'd like just by clicking on the down arrow. Same thing with needs grading. If red troubles you, then you could change that as well. Here you can add criteria, more than or equal to, less than, between. Here I've set up between, so there's different percentages in each. You can change the background color and the text color however you'd like. And then they show you a preview of what it'll look like. Questions on that? Help? Exempt would be an example. For some reason, a student is an exempt from an assignment for one reason or another, so you can actually make it so it doesn't. So all those averages we did earlier, if I had a student that was exempt from a quiz for one reason or another, I don't tend to do that, but if it happens, then what would happen is that it wouldn't show up in the averages. It wouldn't count it, and it wouldn't say needs grading either. It wouldn't pester you about grading that assignment. So maybe there's an assignment you decided that you're not going to include in the semester, although it's in Blackboard. Maybe it's because you're teaching an 16-week course, an 8-week course, and there's some assignments that just you can't get to. You could exempt all those assignments that you're not going to use. And then Blackboard wouldn't be looking for that, especially if you're doing point totals. It wouldn't be looking to add that into your overall point total. Good questions. I know it's a lot. We need a little stand up. You want to stand up and get some active learning, and usually I'm much more active. I know some of you are very active on your computers, so I don't want to prejudge, but I see the energy level getting a little. This is the time I usually have a second cup of coffee and I tell myself, don't do it. All right, categories. So just moving down the list, I brought up categories quite a bit. Categories is where I define for our overall example for quizzes. So in here, what I've done for categories is I've copied my assignment categories from my syllabus so that they have that description in there so they know what are those main category types, like exams or discussions. I don't use journals in this course. And then over here so this is the description, and then over here would be the columns that are impacted by those or assigned those categories. So if I wanted to create a quiz category, if I've already created a category or someone did for me in the course show, I can just hit edit and edit it in there. Or if I'm making a brand new one, I can just hit create category, name, description. Again, I would recommend copying from your syllabus your description of that assignment type or category type. But once you've set that up, there's not any, it seems pretty impractical in this view, but then it shows up on your drop-down menu. So when you want to do Like for example, that average, you want to create an average column, then I can create that average just for those quiz type assignments, or just for labs, or just for tests or exams. So it's very useful to kind of, for students to have a quick view and a running total, if you set it up that way, of how they're doing in different areas of your course. Again, you don't have to label, it's not required, but I find it very useful once you've set it up, especially if you reuse your old course shells from one year to the next. So this is something I wouldn't want to redo every time I do a Blackboard course necessarily. I probably would, but it's a lot of detail to put all that in. So categories. And if you're playing this live, what I've done is kind of stacked on top of here. So we're going to talk a little bit about smart views. You can see quiz is one of the ones I highlighted, and I added it as a favorite. If you add it as a favorite, or if you want to set it up in the first place, you can say add as a favorite right here. And then category, since I set it up as a category, like our previous example, quiz, all users, and then I can get it to all statuses. And then if you just keep clicking on the slides, it'll show you what the result is. What would result is on your course management, you'd see quiz listed there. Let's take a look at that. If we look on the quiz center here, now it's not the full grade center anymore. It just says grade center quiz. And then it just shows you that category. Remember the power of categories. So if you had labs, or if you had specific assignment type, you're able to look at just a snapshot of how all the students are doing in that.
And then you can just grade from that.
You can grade from this too. You could. You don't have to look at the full grade center, which can be really, depending on how much, I have way too many assignments, I know. But depending on how many assignments you have, it's a lot to kind of look through all of this. It is. It's important for the students to have that full view, I think. But for your specific grading, yeah, it does help quite a bit. I've used it that way too. Good question, good point. Grade center. All right, so for our column organization, I've kind of jumped in here already. Here's an example where you can show hide to students. So remember that little symbol with the slash through it. This is another place you can do that. You can do it within the creating that column as well. You can change the category. So if I accidentally labeled something a quiz when I was late at night and I wasn't thinking, I labeled it a lab and it's supposed to be a quiz, I can change that label here. It'll say what the label is, the category right here, so I can see right away visually in this section of column organization. Change the grading period. So if I didn't set this up, Daryl, then it wouldn't be a problem. But sometimes I might have accidentally put it on 2016 instead of 2017. A good reason to get rid of it if you're not using it anymore. And then show hide, it has hide selected columns. So if I select a specific column down here or down below, it'll hide those. Or show if I've already hidden them, but I want to reveal them. Maybe it's that unit 7, we're there finally, and I've graded unit 6's stuff and I want them to show them up on the grade, then I make sure to select it. Show selected columns in all grade center views. So if I created that quiz, for example, that quiz subset of a grade book, I could also have on all of those subsets, maybe I have a lab one, I have a quiz one, I could also show up, the final grade shows up there in that column. I could do that as well. If I go to change category, here I've got all the categories I pre-assigned. Remember, we've been using quiz as our primary example of categories that we've used. If I go to changing grade periods, again, it's right up there. So those are my options. So let's take a quick look at that in here. Again, manage, column organization. And what I find happening over and over again, if I forget to put a course, when I create a new assignment, it's going to show up down here at the bottom. Well, if I put 2017, it'll show up right here. But one of the things that's not evident in my, my presentation, my Google Slides, is I can also drag and drop. So if I want practice quizzes there, I just grab this little arrow key here and I can drop it down or drop it up. You'll notice that I've got student ID, username and first name and last name hidden. it's everything above the bar is frozen at the very beginning. So when I scroll from the left hand side of my big, huge grade book to the right, I always can keep like the username or the student name there or last name, whatever you'd like to do. To do that, you just drag the last name up and it would be there. So just drag these up. So this is in all Grade Center views. And it would be important in all Grade Center views, even just my quiz grade book, to know what student I'm grading perhaps, or maybe you don't want to know, and so we can talk more about that too.
Question about the organization. I might be doing this wrong, but every time a student takes a quiz, it'll assign it to this semester, but it'll put it at the bottom, and I want them all together, so the students show up at this, show the students all together, or
So you're saying you have like an assignment, a quiz assignment, and you graded for a student and it's showing up at the bottom of their grade view, or where's it?
It's
Yeah.
not already in there, it's not the quiz that you do.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up.
Well,
That means I'll have a quiz and maybe a lab, and it's all mixed up.
yeah, how it shows up for the students is the order you have here.
Yeah,
so-
that's what I was doing. So I always
yeah.
have to change that.
So you have to drag it up. It's,
Which is easier with that link up there. Right.
oh yeah, to see what they're seeing. Yeah. So if you wanted,
No, not that one.
not that
I
one.
mean for reorganizing.
oh yeah, for reorganizing it.
There.
Yep. So if I'm going to want to do it up there, but if I do it here, then I can shift it this way. Yep.
Yeah,
So
faster that way.
there's more than one way to do it. I like to drag and drop things up, but I think it's faster when you have something way at the bottom. So what Daryl's saying is you click on this arrow, and thank you for bringing that up because I highlighted it in the slides, but I forgot. Let's say I wanted the PowerPoint way at the top. I can just select it and then I can move it up by just clicking this way or down if it's in the wrong spot. In this column organization, it's very powerful too to see where you've made mistakes, because you always will. If I forgot to assign a due date, it'll show up in here. Or maybe I have 2016 here for the practice quiz instead. So it also is a global way to look at your grade book and column organization to see what you forgot to update when you were in a hurry. And then it tells you the date that you created that assignment. So maybe it's an old assignment, you didn't realize that. Or the point totals, maybe you forgot to assign point totals, which I didn't for the student information survey. I don't count that for points. There's a lot in this. I use column organization a lot, partly because what Daryl's saying too, if I make a new assignment, I have to go in here and drag it back up there again to the top or wherever I want it. And you'll see I try to put, you don't have to do it this way, but I try to put the due dates in sequential order for the students. So as they're looking in grade book, they know that the first assignments are at the top and they scroll down and get to the bottom.
What is the purpose of the availability line on there? Is that just show that the student is logged into the course?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me just,
On that shown,
you want to hit, oh, by the one section here. So last access or back here in columns? Do you mean this one or here, show me again. I'll go on.
to the,
Yeah, just mouse problem, sorry.
the
So
bottom one there in the top half, no, go back up.
go back up.
In that top square, right there at the very top, availability underneath student ID.
Oh, availability there. I wonder if that has to do with whether or not that student has been, you guys might have to answer this one, but I think
Whether or not the students
access to the course,
So if
yeah,
they didn't pay their tuition bill.
yeah.
And you need to make them unavailable.
Oh, that's-
it shouldn't be in
yeah.
the course. But you don't want to delete the work they've done to this point, because they can pay that tuition bill,
Uh-huh.
and maybe then they can be made available.
Or if you had a TA added to, which I do in some of my courses, they might be added, but they're not available yet for whatever reason. Maybe they just haven't done that yet in IT. That's a good question. Sorry, it took me so long to needed to give you a laser pointer. Okay. So row visibility, speaking of like availability, if there's a lot in column organization though, that's very powerful. I think when I look at a grade book, I spend a lot of time here in column organization. But I'm anal, so I like to have things in a certain order. Okay, row visibility, I don't want to do that. So if you look, there's a selection there where you can click on, I have VOS and preview. And if you do that, then you hit submit, then it won't show up in the grade book, in theory. So I don't use it very often. Well, maybe it's in present mode, but it is one of those things where you can use row visibility to help hide rows or show rows if they've been hidden. And you wouldn't see it in here. You would see maybe a hit. It wouldn't show up in this grade center view at all. Yeah, if they withdraw, yep, there's that. Or sometimes they spend the first week in your course and then they drop, but it just takes a while for it to show up that they've dropped. Yep, good point. We're almost there. Send email. Send email. I use this because it is now linked. I don't tend to use this feature in terms of send email this way. I tend to say, you know, I see a student had a 55, or all the students that have 55, or maybe these students in yellow here haven't done the assignment yet and we're getting close to the deadline. Then I'll say email selected students. Or observers if you want, or email for selected users. And I'll just select myself here so you don't have to be exposed to all the students' usernames like I did on row visibility, but oh well. If I email selected users, then it will have, this is my preview username, the additional receipt. So it's just like it's not Gmail, but it's like that. And it will go through Gmail. And so what does it look like when you actually send the email? That's one of the downsides. Some of the links might not work. If you have videos that you're putting in there, it might not work. So I typed up this message and then, so you can select email, last users. And then this is kind of how it shows up on our Gmail account. So this is a screenshot from my Gmail. So here you can see that it's got a long front end. So your subject line is often hidden for students on their phones. So that's one of the problems of using Blackboard email, but it's very efficient. So I use it quite often just to select individual students that, hey, I see we've got, you know, you haven't completed this assignment and we only have 24 hours left. I'm concerned, you know, I'm worried about you, you know, are you okay? That kind of stuff, you know, so send them I use it for quick messages like that. And then because if I scroll back, you can select, you can say whether or not include list of recipients. So if it's a group, you might want to do that. So everyone in the group knows that you're sending it to them. But generally I don't select this. So I know it's bad of me, but sometimes I'll just send out, you know, 6 of them saying, hey, I see your assignments. And I don't necessarily say Susan or Sasha or John or whatever. I just, you know, so it's a quick way for me to give them a heads up. Hey, I noticed you're missing that. So that's how I use the gradebook email system mostly. So we're running close on time. Reports, I'm not going to show you live versions of this, but reports I use once in a while, especially if a student is a concern. If student services ask me to look at a student and see how they're doing, then I'll create one of these reports for an individual student. Here's an example I did for August report as a report name, date, course information. I selected all that. And then the next slide, if you scroll down from here, you have users, all users, or I can do selected users. So if I'm doing something for student services, I'll do a selected user. I can look at how much time that they've spent in the course, where they spent that time in the course. It's very nice because you can also say, what's the average time other students spend in the course to give them an idea that, you know, they're really not. For my courses too, face-to-face, they're always using Blackboard. So anytime they come to class, they are using Blackboard. So it's also a way for me to realize, hey, was Sasha in class last Tuesday? She wasn't, because it doesn't show up on this availability report. Of course, they could do that from the dorm and just sign in during class time. Wouldn't know from this point of view. Oops. So let's see. And then I selected, you know, if I want to do categories, quizzes are example. I could just do quizzes if I want to do it by category and see how they're doing for quizzes. And then down here, just custom text. You can hit preview to see how it looks before you publish it. And here's an example of just all the quizzes for one student. If I kept scrolling down, there'd be the next student if I didn't select an individual student. And then the average for the course and the median and the due dates listed there. That's an example. Viewing grade history, if you have a TA, you want to see how they've graded, or if you thought that you went back and updated a grade, you can look at view history for the past 2 weeks. 1 minute left, maybe. Past 2 weeks or months or 6 months. So you can go back and look at all the revisions you've made, or if you have a TA, like I have in one of my classes, you can see what they have or haven't graded. And it's nice kind of history for you. We did preview mode already. Attempt options are kind of nice. There's all kinds. So this is a whole nother Blackboard gradebook. But item analysis is one I tend to like quite a bit. And if you do that, you click item analysis, you can select a specific assignment and then hit run. It'll take you about maybe 2 or 3, maybe a minute. And then you get an email saying, hey, it ran successfully. And then you get a screen that looks like this. You'd have the quiz 1 listed there. If you click on that, then you get an analysis of that assignment, how all the students did on that assignment. I usually switch to average score, depending on how you want to look at it. And I look at the questions that are most missed on that quiz or that assignment, if it is built into Blackboard. And then what I do personally is I like to use them for Kahoots at the beginning of class, where students, who's used Kahoot before? Okay, only one person. So Kahoots are our quiz review. Basically, it's a way to say, okay, how did we do so far with the material this first half of the unit? And then what I do is I allow them to retake it if they want, but these are the 5 most missed questions on that quiz, an item analysis. And I set up a Google Doc for them before they review for their test to look at the 5 most missed questions. And so then they could play those. But we're out of time. Kahoot's a whole nother presentation, I think.
Do you use Kahoot inside of Blackboard?
I do, yes and no, in the sense that I link to it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you look back here at my slides, you'll see that I have an example of, oops. I have an example here of, maybe it was, yeah, here's an example. I cut a screenshot from within Blackboard. So I have the link here to the Kahoot quiz, but that's for the ghost mode. A ghost mode is you've done it in class already and they want to take it again and try to beat out their classmates. So they can retake it again and again to try to get better at it. And so these links tend to be to this page, which shows up on their, most of them use their phones, and then they just put in the pin into there and then they can play it right on their device. So you don't have to have a laptop to do this, which is nice for online courses too. Thank you. I know it was a big download, but that was a huge overview. Thank you for being here today, and feel free to ask me questions. I'm only teaching 16 credits this semester, so I'll have plenty of time. Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to clap for you first.
Oh, thank you.
Earlier on the little decimal places showing up after the whole number. So Learn uses 4 decimal places to actually calculate. It should only be displaying 2 every row. That's a little bit of a bug. It's fixed on the Q4 2016 release. Scholastica right now is on the Q2 release for 2016. So when you upgrade to the next release or subsequent release, you'll see those go back down to the appropriate 2 decimal points. Also on the grading period question, much more common in K-12 where you have like a quarter 1 grade,
True.
quarter 2 grade, and so forth. But if you had a full year course and you wanted to break things up, midterm 1 after the midterm 1, midterm 2 after midterm 2.
Or when ladies, you can feel free to email me if you didn't get a chance to look at the slides, but our Zoom presentation should be exported. So I know I went a little bit fast, especially if you're trying to do it on the fly, but you can go back and watch the video and kind of see some of the ways that we did that. And my slides are available too. You can email me at dvosen, Dave Vosen, if you want, and I can just share it with you easily. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, Bren.
This is something that I'm so surprised that so many folks don't help me with this. But you just
So I've been struggling with this for the whole